All right, guys, it's Dr. Ryan, and today we're going to talk with one of my patients who's been with me for about like a year and a half or so.
That's right.
Uh, this is John. John's going to tell us a little bit about his experience with Summa Up and some of the changes he noticed. So, John, why don't you start off by telling me a little bit about yourself, where you live, what you like to do, hobbies, family, your business.
Yeah. So I'm a software geek. You're seeing an actual profile of where I live. I'm in a condo in Dallas. I've had a fairly successful career, but I was never focused on health, and I spent a lot of time really punishing my body for the success I was trying to have in my profession. And it actually came to a point where I realized, actually through a really unfortunate circumstance with my mom, that I was living essentially the same life that she had raised me to have. And I was at the point where I was going the same route that she was. And it motivated me to find a way to start thinking differently about my health. So professionally, successful software geek, and I love that work, and it's all cool. Years into that, I started dancing more as a social thing and to meet people and, to get away from a bar scene. But then wound up getting so involved in it that I wound up marrying one of the best dancers I could find. And becoming a competitive dancer. And I'm either in front of this very screen working or on a dance floor. It's really, my life has become that simple. To put it in perspective, neither of those things are really feasible for a 54-year-old guy to do at the level that I do without being in my best possible shape.
You kind of mentioned that you were following a trajectory that your mother was following. Can you elaborate on that? What exactly are you referring to?
Yeah. And look, this can even be emotional for me, and I hope it helps others. That, you're raised a certain way, and you just tend to do what mom and dad did in many ways, right? And for me, I got to a point in my career where I was fairly successful, and I wanted to send her on trips that she could never take, and I wanted to give her opportunities she never had, and I wanted to be a great son, right? And do those things. She's 19 years older than me at the time, so not that much older, right? She had me young. And 3 or 4 years in a row, the awesome trip she put together she wanted to take, she literally did not have the energy or the stamina to do, and she canceled the trip. So she had these great thoughts, or I want to, oh wow, I've never gotten to do this, and I'd love to do this, and she'd make all these big plans, and she would literally tell me, John, I just don't feel like I can physically do it. And I thought, wait a minute, that's not that big a difference in age between her and me, right? And I lost her already, by the way, a few years ago.
Sorry.
Years earlier than I think she needed to go, right? I mean, we all do. And by the way, nothing I think that we're doing together, if I don't get a single hour added to my life, that's not what I'm looking for. With you and with the clinic, I'm looking for quality of the hours I have, and I know I'm getting those, right? And that's what I mean, right? The time that I did have her, I just wish she could have been more active and gotten to do some of those things. So that's incredibly motivating, right? If you really do let that settle in, you should do something about it. And I did, and it was obviously imperfectly, but I certainly have done as much as I could, and that's actually caused me to start a path that led me ultimately to you, but it didn't start with you. I tried other things first.
Yeah. Well, why don't we talk a little bit about that journey? Because as you mentioned, you are an accomplished dancer, and I'm certain that you probably were experiencing some problems in that regard that forced you to think about working with a functional medicine provider, a longevity clinic, something of that sort. Let's talk a little bit about those problems exactly.
Yeah. So the biggest challenge is that our bodies are designed to decay, slowly and painfully. And it's at the beginning of every article you read on health is, well, you were the best you were at 30. And I think, man, I flew past 30 without getting any of this fun stuff done. I mean, I was, heads down. And so that's like, oh, no. I got to figure something out here, right? So then you do the typical things, right? You show up at the low testosterone clinic and they say, oh my gosh, you got testosterone to 2. And you start doing those things. But then when you do a little bit more research, you realize that there's so much more to it. And it's everything, right? It's ED is a pill. No, it's actually probably imbalances in hormones, right? Or so there's simple quick fix type stuff that you end up, that's sort of like the easy to get candy at a convenience store. But then when you do some research, you realize the challenges that I'd faced. I needed a nap by Friday afternoon. You know, your energy level isn't sufficient for what you're trying to accomplish, right? That's the easiest one. And I got really in tune with the notion that a 90-year-old man in a nursing home is typically there because he doesn't have the physical stamina to take care of himself. Not that he's not mentally there, but that he's not physically there. And if I can avoid it, Dr. Ryan, I just don't want the slow, painful decline. I'd love to just, big bang, pass in my sleep or whatever. But like I said, if I can add quality to the hours I do have, I am motivated to figure out how to do that. Those are the challenges I wanted to solve for. And I needed someone more holistic and more researched than, well, here's something and here's something, here's something, because I would end up going to a doctor for this and a doctor for that and a little service for this. And I'm thinking, wait, I'm the one who's sort of managing this, and I'm not the guy qualified to manage this. So it became enough that very ironically, I saw a Facebook post, and I'm rarely on Facebook, and I saw a Facebook post and thought, at least take a look at it, because that's the kind of thing I would need, right? Someone who's doing that research, who is a doctor, who's even applying it to his own life. I had every one of those circumstances, and perfectly timed that I saw a Facebook post and thought, why don't I take a look? And you sized up really well. I mean, the focus on the research, and not crazy, but safe. The last thing I want to do is grow a third eyeball. You're using your own research. You're doing your own journey. You're sharing it. It actually made it much easier than I would have thought, because telemed, this is something I would not have expected to be willing or wanting to do but it actually has worked really well. I mean, when I've been working on a challenge, we've connected 3 or 4 times within 60 days, right? And we've tried stuff, and it actually works really well, much better than I even thought it would.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, you kind of touched upon a lot of things, and I just want to kind of reiterate them. I think it's not just you. Many individuals are looking for an opportunity to extend their years, but again, add life to their years, right? You want to ensure your runway is long, but you want to ensure you have an enjoyable experience throughout that runway. What's the point of living to 120 if you spend the last 30 years of your life bedridden? Nobody wants that.
Doesn't make sense.
Right. And I can totally appreciate the fact that you were looking for a holistic experience in which, not only are you just optimizing your hormones, optimizing testosterone is very important, but you also want to do the things that are going to promote longevity, reduce glycation, improve oxidation, reduce inflammation, reduce methylation, all things which, when coupled together with an appropriate hormonal optimization program, will make a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so,
and if you don't mind my interrupting, testosterone is like the big ticket item everybody's selling a bunch of, right? Well, let's all get injected with. But you've taught me very clearly it's actually a balance of several hormones, and there's no need to go into that kind of here. You do that for every patient, but you've made it really clear to me that these actually all have to play in a certain balance. You can't pump one without having to basically manage the other. So that's the kind of stuff that I would have I'm not even getting tested for estrogen level. And there's other things at that other clinic for the few years that I was there, right? So it all puts it in balance. And also, by the way, with another clinic prior to getting with you, I was getting pellets injected because it was these, massive needles every, twice a week. And frankly, I'm getting bleeders in my thighs every time I'm doing them. But then when you said, hey, why don't you microdose a certain amount every day? It actually levels off better. It's easier for you to consume. I thought, yes, absolutely. Why not? Because I went from the needles to pellets in my hip, and the scar tissue is going to be there forever. So I thought you're just more thoughtful about the very things that I was doing with other clinics. And I'm doing other things with you that I think round out and make the whole thing. And I can feel it, right? I definitely have the experience myself of knowing that things are definitely improved.
Yeah, when you work with a physician, and again, this is just in general, a physician that kind of eats his or her own cooking and lives the life, it really makes a big difference. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I'm not saying that pellets are the wrong answer for everyone, but for a certain type of individual, I found that microdosing with insulin syringes and doing sub-Q or shallow intramuscular injections really is so much easier and really does not cause a lot of scar tissue or scarring at all, and gives you very, very stable testosterone levels. So that's very good. I'm glad you
Yeah.
mentioned that.
And again, to anybody who's nervous about injecting a needle, it's not even a pinch most of the time. I mean, and even if it's a pinch, you don't remember you did it a couple of minutes later, and you're making, I've got to make sure I remembered that I did it, not that it's so uncomfortable or so awkward that I, remember it as a terrible experience. It's actually not a big deal at all.
I am going to go back to one other quick thing, and I think you kind of alluded to it, but I do want you to be a little more specific. So you talked about how you alluded to the fact that your energy levels are a bit lower, perhaps in some way your physical stamina or your physique was not optimized. How exactly did that negatively affect you? Was there like a particular like dance competition where you're like, oh man, I could do so much better, or I'm feeling gassed halfway through? Was there something particularly in your business where you're like trying to grow and you're like, oh man, if I just had that extra 20%, I could just watch my business scale, but I don't. Was there something along those lines that you
Yeah,
noticed?
so there's one in both that are examples, but it's really when you yourself are capable of executing at your best physically, and your mind is clear, then you won't even be able you won't even be able to articulate the difference between you when you're not. When you execute at your best, things go better in general, and you can't guarantee that this or that. But I can give you a couple of clear examples of when your stamina is not strong enough, you end up not going and having the fun time you were going to have. You end up indoors when you should be outdoors. You end up in your own place, I don't know, eating a bag of potato chips instead of out being with other people and enjoying your life, that sort of stuff. And I had a version of that. And it was actually really funny how many Friday afternoons I needed to basically nap, because by the time I'd gotten to that point of the week, that I literally couldn't stare into a weekend without thinking that I needed an extra night and sort of an extra half a night of sleep or whatever in work. So I travel quite a bit, and I don't as much at this particular moment in my life. But a few years back, I was one of the top flyers on American Airlines, which is not something you want to be. The people who envy that haven't done that, because it really takes a toll. And I travel a fair amount now, especially internationally. You definitely feel the difference when you're handling jet lag better or not. And I really don't get jet lag. And it's real easy to see that those are two very clear differences. When I am myself physically in really good shape, I just, those things, I just don't happen.
Okay. So it sounds like your energy levels were certainly not optimized. It sounds like the travel that you were doing, which is very key for your business, was
Oh, yeah.
something that was taking a huge toll.
Oh, yeah.
You were investing so much time in your business throughout the week. A lot of people talk about the 5 for 2 deal that they make when they're working really hard in their business, or even 6 for 1, where they're
That's right.
pushing themselves for 6 days and they're expected to get that one day off. You were using that day off not for enjoyment. You're just using it to recuperate and sleep, right?
There certainly were times. Yep.
Yeah. And so I can kind of see your frustration with that. I guess the last thing was, so you mentioned you'd worked with another clinic, and there's always like a level of inertia that you have to get over to, make a change, right? To look at your decision tree and be like, well, hey, this is probably not the right path. I needed to do something different.
Mm-hmm.
What finally made you say, yep, I need to go ahead and make a change and work with Summa Up and try something different?
So I was doing a number of things, because I couldn't get one clinic that would actually take the whole, and that was the motivation for me was, if I could find someone who really would share the responsibility with me, and because I know that my health is my responsibility, right? But to have and I view you as a coach. I view you as the guy that needs to set the expectations and prescribe the right things that I need to be looking after, but it is mine to do, right? I could not find that here. And Dallas has lots of great clinics and lots of great doctors. And maybe I could have been walking the, Central Expressway looking for somebody who was, capable like you are. But I looked around and I just had not found that. And so when I found that, it made it pretty easy, honestly. And there was a very specific thing. It wasn't like literally the straw that broke the camel's back, proverbially, but it was close. The clinic that I was with had one peptide, not a collection of them based on what you're trying to accomplish and your body type and where you're going. It was, oh, sure, I offer peptides. It's a peptide and it's this one. And it had been offered for years, and it was exactly the same formulation that had been for years. But then when I have a conversation with you about particular peptides, like to potentially increase growth hormone, there's a half a dozen, and some of them have this behavior, and some of them better in this way, and some of that. That's important distinctions for me, right? Those are important distinctions, and the fact that that's the kind of engagement that you have. It's not I got one, it's on the shelf, I give it to every patient. That wasn't enough for me. I mean, just candidly, that wasn't enough. So that puts me I'm doing research, looking at black marketplaces to get ridiculous. And it's like, no, that just doesn't sound like a good idea. So here we go, right? So that was actually I would do this if I could find someone who could help me either identify if some of these other growth hormone stimulating peptides are smarter for me to take than this one, because it was either that one or nothing, right? You couldn't possibly do that because you've actually even described to your patients why one is appropriate versus another's appropriate versus, right? So that's a really good example of where I felt like, okay, there's a better way. And if I could get a really learned coach who could drive that, anyway, there you go.
Yeah, I agree. I totally understand, John. And I think it's important for any individual that is choosing a clinic to find someone that offers what they are looking for. It's great if they can do it all under one roof, right? Mm-hmm. And at least offer options, because your one peptide may not be the best, right? And as you mentioned, it's not just about testosterone, estrogen, growth hormone, thyroid, DHA, pregnenolone, and for women, progesterone. And so it's key that you're working with a physician that understands how to optimize all of those hormones. So I'm really happy to recognize that.
And my version is, you cannot run your mouth. You also focus us very much on diet, right? This is physique is great. It's actually mostly through what you consume. The table muscle has to be worked off, right? And you're super clear about that, right? You're putting my body in the best possible place that if I do the work, I will get the outcome. If my chemistry is all screwed up, I almost can't accomplish it at all. You give me the ability to do what I need to do, where I get where I can go. And that's great. But it does include, and just for anybody who's watching this, you don't just get to inject a peptide, take a few pills and your physique is great. You put in the work. But I have friends who, and I've worked so hard on to try to help them understand, if your hormone chemistry is not right, you almost can't get there, no matter what you do. And I've got guys who've gone through 3-day fasts and they weigh a pound more than when they started. And I don't even know how the physics of that could work. But you give us the ability to then do the work and accomplish good things. And I have seen, and even in the last 12 months, one of those things, back to what did I lack or what can I now do? I have the stamina and strength to do the theater arts type work with my wife, where it's the lifts and tricks and, she's up in the air and my bodies are the tree she's climbing on, kind of thing. And it requires plenty of strength and stamina from her, I've learned. But frankly, you can't do that in an hour and a half long practice if you're not in pretty decent shape. And I think the difference definitely of the last couple of years is I'm capable of doing that, and just did the other day. And, that's a really clear indication that I'm in a better spot than I was.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. And I think more and more clinics and individuals are recognizing that your diet and your exercise regimen plays a huge role in your outcome. But that's something that intuitively I've always tried to mention to my patients, primarily because of my background. Prior to becoming a doctor, I was a personal trainer, and I did compete as a physique athlete for many years. And so that comes natural to me. And you can obviously the hormones are important. And I like the fact that you alluded to that you need to optimize hormones before you do. If you don't have optimized hormones, making changes in your physique is going to be a lot harder.
Very difficult, yeah.
But you gotta do the work. You gotta diet. You gotta train. You gotta do the right things, which obviously you're doing. So we kind of talked about your experiences prior to joining the clinic. Let's talk a little bit more about the experiences you had after joining the clinic. So specifically, what changes did you notice in your physique and overall health after joining the clinic?
Yeah. So I've leaned out more. I've put on muscle easier. My energy level's higher. Even right now, by the way, I'm in a kind of a blitzing mode. And any of your folks who are in the software world, it's sort of like tax season for the accountants, right? There are times when you just got to go ahead, you just got to work a bunch of hours and just get a bunch done. You have to remain mentally sharp, and I'm capable of doing that right now, and I'm doing it at a level that, I mean, I'm matching my 20s and 30s, and I can honestly say I feel as good now as I ever did as an adult. If I could keep this as long as possible, I'd be totally thrilled.
That I think is probably the most remarkable thing that I notice with my patients, right? For a lot of them, you would think that like they reached their peak in their 20s and it's all about trying to recapture it. But there's a fair amount of patients that I work with that they actually feel the very best that they've ever felt.
Yeah.
And they might be in their 40s, 50s, or 60s. And I'm not really sure what to ascribe it to. Maybe it's just the fact that they're at a point where they have the experience, the knowledge, the wealth that they can to fully enjoy what they have. But from a physical aspect, when all of that comes together, it's like they're fully self-actualized and they feel, well, it almost feels like you feel invincible. Granted, obviously, you're not immortal or anything, but it's really nice having that feeling where you can take on the world and you can take on any challenge. And my goal, of course, is to keep this as long as we can. And if we talk to a lot of luminaries in the longevity and anti-aging fields, they feel that the upper limit for the runway for human life is going to be 150 or 60, and maybe even longer. So there's a very good chance we can maintain this for many years. It's kind of amazing. Like, could you imagine that you aren't even done with 1/3 of, well, maybe just about 1/3 of your life? You have 2/3, almost 2/3 to go. That'd be crazy, right?
It would, and it's and for me to remain really grounded, I just think I've devoted so much of my life to a career, raising kids, doing certain things that I have moments of my life that are a total blur, but there's now so much life left to live well, right? It's really just so do it, right? And it gets all the way back to that thought about my mom, where it was her opportunity to do whatever she wanted to do, and not being physically able to do it is just, it's a crime you committed on yourself. So you just don't let that be your story, right? So the motivation is there. What you help, when a doctor asks you what your goals are, that's like, yes, right? That's you don't hear that from the auto repair version of the medical practice, which is, when you break down, you go and then they fix you, but you can't switch your car if it's your body, right? Because if it breaks down too many times, you just swap your car out for it. It doesn't work with our bodies that way. So this is the one we got to keep running. There's a whole different way you got to think about it because of that, right? You're never having the it's time to trade. We don't get to do that. But in this regard, getting myself to a performance level that I'm really happy with, keeping it that way. And again, some of the things that we haven't already touched on, brain kit. I'm waking up every morning, sometimes 5 or 5:30 in the morning. I'm immediately on calls with international people who are ready to put me on the spot. I call them the stump the chumps, by the way. And I got to switch my brain to, it's not 3 cups of coffee later. I don't even drink coffee. I've got to be ready right that moment, get right on. I've got to be as sharp as I was in the middle of the day or whatever. Long and short of it, I am. And I'm able to interact with you on the things that concern me to get me to close those gaps. And it's a great experience.
Yeah, that actually kind of leads into my next question. And I'm glad that you mentioned the brain kit. I mean, for someone like yourself who clearly has issues with shift work sleep disorder, with the changes in the hours and the different time zones that you have to work with in terms of your clients, the components of the brain kit, modafinil, caffeine, optimizing those together can really make a huge difference. I'm glad that you've seen the benefits of that. But I'm more kind of interested in some of the changes that you've seen in your business right now. Like, more specifically, it does sound like you've been able to garner more clients, or at least be more in tune, present with those clients, so they perhaps are like, hey, we got to go ahead and work with you guys
Yeah.
further?
So I'm the CEO of a software company, and I drive the product vision in that company. The ultimate bet that a customer who spends a lot of money to acquire our product is the bet on me, on the product that I've invented, the development team that I run, and what I get done, right? And in this particular moment, we are going through a massive set of innovations within that product, and I am driving them very personally and very specifically, if you will, right? It's not the, hey guys, go build something great and let me know when it's done. It's not that kind of engagement, right? I have 80 people in my development team, and every one of them is being fed very specifically by do this, do this, do this. So I have a lot running through my mind, and I myself am coding as well. So I've taken on a lot of the development responsibility myself, because 80 people is not enough. You always want 150 people worth of work, and when you're at 150 people, you want 300 people worth of work. So I'm going from client calls at a high level, blah, 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 analyst meetings, finance with the CFO, investors and board members, straight back to programming, right back to, and it's a 24-hour cycle, right? It never stops. So some nights are only 3-4 hours of sleep. Physically, you have to be capable of handling that. Mentally, you have to be capable of handling that. And I am doing that as well as I was when I was 20.
That's remarkable.
That's just the long and short of it.
That's really crazy. So
I don't prefer it, by the way. Right? I don't, but I have to do it. And I'm capable of it. I won't do it forever. And I will set it aside, and I will have achieved a mission, and I will be thrilled. But for this moment, that's what I need to be doing. And I am capable of it. And I am.
Well, I think, with any entrepreneur, you're going to be in different seasons with your business, right? Yeah. Initially, it's the growth phase, then maintenance, and then, of course, selling. And I think it's at some point or another, you'll probably get to the selling aspect and have a really nice situation where.
And I have, and I know and I know that time is destined to come, given the progress that we're making and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So that obviously feeds your willingness to put in this kind of effort, but you have to be able to support it.
Well, that's wonderful. So it seems that things are going very well in your business. What about your relationships? And they can be with your significant other, with your family. What are some of the changes you've noticed in terms of that?
Yeah, so it's funny, because at about the same time I started with you in the clinic was less than a year of the relationship with my wife. So it's actually all happened at about the same time.
Wow.
And that it's fantastic to have the energy level that you need to do what you really need to do and really want to do, be able to pay attention in general, right? When you are performing, and like I said, you really can't describe if I wasn't performing well, how would that affect me, other than I am mentally focused, I'm physically capable. That gives me, then, like I said, then it's up to me to be a good husband, to be a good brother, to be a good friend. And I think I'm able to do that. It's always difficult to make the time choices, right? And that's all that always will, gnaw on me. But I am physically and mentally capable of doing all the right things.
I'm really glad you touched upon that, because that is something I hear from a lot of prospective patients, and a change that I see after they become patients and have been treated appropriately for a bit. They find that they're able to manage their time much better, so they can deepen their relationships with their family, with their significant others, with their friends, with their colleagues. And I like the fact that it's affecting you on a range of different levels, emotionally, physically. We are social creatures at our core, right?
Yeah.
And you can have a tremendous amount of money, but if you don't have a special someone or special group of people to spend it with, what's the point, right?
For many, right? I'm sure there are some who actually function very comfortably. I don't. I love the fact that I could go heads down and just work on something for hours, but then I need that exact opposite. And what I have found is that in years past, when my health was not nearly as good as it is now, it would take me hours to accomplish what I now accomplish in minutes. There's a total difference, right? And the type of work that I do, if my mind is really well switched on and I am really executing well mentally, I solve problems very quickly. I could go days and get nothing accomplished, or I could go hours and get a week's worth accomplished, right? The whole difference is, am I mentally in the best state I can be in? Am I physically not distracted and capable? And it really comes down to that. If I am sleep deprived, poor nourishment, physically broken down, mentally fogged, it's the classic garbage in, garbage out. It's the pouring, lake water in your car and expecting it to run well. It's all of the normal, typical analogies, right?
Yeah.
When you're doing the opposite of those things, you can expect, and you should expect, you're going to function better. So if I can get more done in a day than I would have otherwise, I should be spending more of that time on people and other things that are important to me. And when I don't, by the way, I'm hard on myself about it, because I really should. I mean, there's no reason not to. I lost an uncle that I didn't get to see a few months before he left us, and that's just on me. Just John, take the time. He's there. Just take the time. This is the time of your life. You should be doing those things, right? But I'm capable of doing it. If I were incapable of doing it, that would be a different story. But I really am. I'm empowered to do this, and I'm sure every one of the folks who would watch this, it's the same thing, right? We all have to make those choices.
Yeah, it's kind of a profound statement, because, one thing I guess a lot of us don't recognize is, after we have grown up and we've left the house, we're like, well, hey, we have our whole life to go ahead and talk to our parents or talk to our family or talk to the loved ones. But outside the people like in your immediate family, people you live with, the amount of times that you're actually going to spend with them actually drops off precipitously, right? And so it's so key to at least spend like a couple times a year, or maybe like at least like once a year with these individuals, because if you look at them in aggregate, it might only be like 15 or 20 times before that person might pass away. I'm sure, I'm not trying to dredge up, uncomfortable memories, but
it's very true. And no, in fact, it's an opportunity for me to honor him by just even talking about it, right? This was the larger than life uncle that I remember when I was literally a toddler, and he was dating my biological aunt, and then they ended up married. I mean, and he was like this, like I say, larger than life. He was a cop in Harlem and rode a motorcycle and a horse for the police department. I mean, you just think, when you're right. And so now, years and years later, his body's broken, and he's on his, he's going down, right? But just take the moment, just make sure, right? Remember him, shed a tear, it's fine, right? Honor all the great kind of what he was for me. And so it's a good thing, right? And that's a good emotion. And yeah, but we have the ability, right? I mean, you've put yourself in a place where you're capable of doing those things, and I have too. I'm thankful for that. So we're obligated. So so do it, right? And put yourself in the best physical position you can to be able to do that and still accomplish everything else, because it takes that, right? I mean, I can't suck at work and go take a bunch of time off.
Yeah.
Right? If I'm executing like a madman, I can. It literally does, Dr. Ryan. It does come down to that. If I'm executing really well, I can take the entire afternoon and do dance practice, and I do. I can take an entire afternoon during the week. I can do 4 hours straight of dance practice. This has already happened this week, and then go right back to work. Nothing. I dropped nothing by doing that. But if I'm not executing well, and a whole afternoon of work, no way, not possible, right?
Yeah, it all kind of draws back to obtaining that ideal performance state. And when you choose a provider, you want to work with the clinician that actually looks at you and tries to ascertain what you're trying to achieve, like looks at your goals, wants you to achieve that ideal performance state, a mental and a physical component of it. And that's something that we always try to do with prospective patients and have them achieve when they join. Yeah. Okay, so you've described a litany of benefits that have come from you with working with Summa Up, but is there something that you might have missed, or was there something else perhaps that you didn't mention?
There's 100 things I could talk about it tactically. I will bring up one thing, super sensitive, but I'm just going to say it anyway. I went a couple of months with a serious ED problem, and
Mm.
I never had it. And thank goodness it's resolved again and I think I'm in a pretty good spot. But it was a really good example of, hey, doctor, this is incredibly frustrating. I'm not used to this. Oh my gosh, please help. And you are absolutely fantastic. And I ended up with a very thorough education in how estrogen plays such a role, and low numbers are not good and high numbers are not good. Good numbers are good, and all of that stuff. And it took a couple of months for that to sort of actually even get into my thick skull and into what I'm doing, for me to behave correctly and all that. But rather than do what I am sure so many people are hearing, just jack yourself up with a pill. And I imagine that's probably good as a supplemental thing, but to say, hey, wait a minute, let's get the body chemistry right and make sure that if there's I thoroughly respect how you handle that kind of thing much more thoughtfully than I would have been treated at somewhere else. And of course, just keeping an eye on it. And then you even ask, it's been a year, right? But still, it's like, okay, we're still good there. We're still good here.
Yeah, there's this misconception that, and this is talking generally, of course, that as we get older, our physical desires or libido just kind of drops off. But I've had many patients and many relationships where this has not been the case, and it is just so gratifying to bring that aspect back to a patient and watch as his wife or his girlfriend is just so thankful that they're able to connect in that regard.
Going through that process with you made me a client for life, made me a patient for life.
Oh, well, thank you. And I don't think, under no circumstances do I think it's crude. We all have our different love languages in which we connect. For some of it's physical touch. And if you're with someone in which physical touch is an important love language, depriving them of that is tough.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, just to kind of end things here, what would you tell someone who's watching this and is uncertain about joining the clinic? What would you say to that individual?
Yeah, this is not as hard a decision as you might think. You can definitely improve how you feel and how you perform. And if you're not putting yourself in the best possible position to do that, what are you spending your money on? It's lost on me, all the folks who are trying to save money on their health and always have the newest iPhone or don't mind spending an extra whatever, I think investing in your own health I just don't know where we got off, where we think that's, where we went astray, where anyone who's thinking that way, I think you really need to check your logic, because you will feel better every moment of every day. You will become a better version of yourself. You will have, right? So that's money well spent. I bet there's all kinds of stuff we could sit down and write down on, like, what are you spending money there for? But if it's on your own mental and physical well-being, I think that's pretty decent investment money, right? So I think that if it's a financial concern, and of course we've all got to make the budget work, but I would be trying my best to find a path to making it work. If I were an individual who's not in their best possible physical and mental health now. And by the way, I keep saying mental, it's both. You are not who you really want to be unless you are physically and mentally as strong as you possibly can, right? You're able to accomplish things you didn't think you could, right? You're going to do things you didn't think you could do. I don't know how to put a price tag on that. And working with you is, I'd have to say, that's one of the reasons why a testimonial like this hopefully is useful, is, you start sending money to a guy and then you hopefully end up with a Zoom every once in a while, and you think, okay, well, I hope this means anything. But it's actually been fantastic, right? Walking through blood work as frequently as needed, and more frequently when there's a challenge. You've been the one saying, hey, I need to send you out for a lab again. It's not, I'm not pestering you saying I've got to, I need help here. It's been a very collaborative thing. And like I say, I think of you as a coach. You are trying to get me to some place. I am trying to win. You're the guy who's trying to get me there. And in that regard, it's been a really good experience. So I would encourage someone to give that a try. you're worth more than I'm paying for you.
Well, I really appreciate that. I don't know if I can accept all those compliments, but what I will say is this. I think anyone that is planning to make an investment in our health, that you have to accurately gauge if it's a good return on your investment. We all want to get a return on our investment, right? And I think intuitively we all know that optimal health is really really key, but it's a concern that whether or not you're going to get a good return on the investment you put in, right? And it seems that you, from your experience as well as many of my other patients, that return is not just linear. In some cases, it's exponential, and I'm just glad to be part of that.
Yeah, I couldn't go back. I couldn't go back. And because I mean, and I would know better, and I would think, what are you doing? Why would you even let yourself, get to this point? Once you put yourself there, it's actually not as hard as you might think to keep yourself there. So if you're one of those guys who's very much like me, who's like, it just seems like it's just an insurmountable task, it is a few months of putting yourself in a certain position. And once you are on that path, it feeds itself. And once you get there, with yo-yo diets are the ones who go back, right? The yo-yo dieters, the guys who are not actually getting any healthier, they're just taking artificial ways to get drug. But the folks who actually get themselves on the right path, I can't imagine like deciding like, nah, I'm going to throw away my health now. Actually, I've decided this whole keeping, doing it right is a mistake. I just can't for the life of right. So get on that path. It'll be easy to stay on once you start seeing the progress.
Well, thank you, John. That was really wonderful. I really appreciate you sharing your experience, and I want to thank you again for being a patient of the clinic.
I'm thrilled to be here, and thanks to you and to your staff. It's really been a great experience for me.